the Future Print Tech Fest. We have one of our most popular speakers back with us today. That's Richard Darling from Ricoh Europe, from the Ricoh's industrial print business. Richard's role is strategic business development. He's had a long career in Inkjet, so I'd call him an Inkjet expert who's seen how Inkjet has developed, changed, matured, and all those things. Excellent presentation coming up now, entitled Groupthink and the Inkjet Arms Race. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you. That's a big introduction. What you really said, if I put it in different terms, you said, I'm old, which is another word for experience, and I've been around a bit.
yeah, likewise. But I mean, I'm now 50, so I'm in a similar camp, although I'm not an Inkjet expert. I can't claim to be either. So that's why we invite people like you to present at the Future Print Tech Fest. So if you'd like to get your presentation or start sharing your presentation, we can get into the meat of your message today. Yeah.
Or the vegan protein, maybe.
Indeed, yeah. Okay.
Often it's said that Inkjet's not quite ready for industry. That's been going on for years and years, but really I think it's about time it went the other way around, because some of the things that have happened in the wider economy and the supply chain issues have sort of shown that maybe industry is not quite ready for change and digitization. There are various forms of manufacturing that are looking to digitize, move from push to pull. And Inkjet does serve that. So events over the last 18 months have probably played into our hands, but it has exposed that not everybody's ready for it. And it's also sort of demonstrated that Inkjet as a technology is ready for some of the challenges. But there is also the background of print snobbery, where high resolution, smaller dots and zillions and millions of them, and putting everything on a knife edge just to be a bit more clever, and clamoring for more tech, setting unrealistic expectations and then sort of delivering short. It's quite difficult to do in a manufacturing environment and get away with it, because if a process is designed to operate 24/7 at a certain speed, that's what it has to do. So there's a lot of stuff in this first slide, but it's really it's on a theme that I banged on about a fair bit, and maybe people are getting bored about. But faster adoption of slower inkjet is better than holding out for something that's knife edge and unreliable, and doesn't actually make any difference. So if it's got more resolution and it's more clever, then fine. But if it just delivers less reliability, then it's not good. So I think I set myself the task, I was asked to do this, is to challenge some of the groupthink. Groupthink being an Orwellian term. So there are some inkjet tech. That's the industry thing. There's some inkjet groupthink as well, which I'll go into. But it is industry against techie, and there's something in the middle ground, which, without sounding like Tony Blair, there's probably a third way. Then I'm going to talk about speed, which is often something that the inkjet industry craves. And I'm going to sort of look at Google Maps and Goldratt more later. The technology journey, I'm equating it to the automotive industry. Back to that reliability theme and the speed contrast, a Volvo estate against an F1 car is probably what we could compare to illustrate the point. So that's what I do. Then looking at this as it's a process of delivery. The printhead is actually a DHL van, and nobody sort of cares about the type of van that delivers it. What they actually want to know is what's in the parcel that their grandma got them as a birthday present. So we should take account of what we're delivering as a priority, not how we're delivering it and what vehicle we're delivering it by. And that sort of flows into the theme that I think there's quite a few people talking about. There's the first principle thinking is looking at the problem it solves and how we appeal to solve that problem rather than just trying to do something a bit cleverer. Industry groupthink is where we were told years ago that Inkjet would never do what Screen can, and then signing graphics, in the signing graphics world, people proved that it could be done. It could be equivalent cost of ownership, cost of output. It could be more versatile. There was less wastage, and so on and so forth. That's decades old, that sort of challenge. But originally it can't be done. And then people often say we must have offset quality. whatever offset quality means. And for some people use the term resolution as synonymous with quality, or drop size as an indicator. Those really have been, by many others over the years, they've been challenged. But if you really want offset quality, then do it by offset. That's simple. But if you want something that's functionally equivalent, that nobody can tell the difference about, except for people who look through microscopes and loupes, then maybe offset's the only solution. Inkjet will be different, and screen is different from Flexo, is different from offset. But I think really what people are talking about is the lack of defects, and what, as you go to higher resolutions, they're looking for no defects showing, and I think that's an important part of quality. So it's not just the theoretical quality; it's the practical, in practice quality. Then color gamut. Inkjet can never hit the color space. Oh, it can't do this, it can't do that. The delta E is too great, and yeah, we hear it often. But then what actually happens in the analog world, and what happens in other forms of digital, is that it doesn't hit the color spots either. So if you actually measure things on supermarket shelves, they don't actually hit the brand owner's own specifications. So I think that's really an excuse, not a reason. And end customers don't care. They don't really care if it's not perceivable. If you need a scientific instrument or a magnifying instrument to actually notice something, it's not really relevant. And I don't think that we should allow the print snobs, the experts, to be the QC for consumers. Consumers can do their own QC. And then the claim from industry is that, oh yeah, but the kilo cost of the ink is this. How much is your kilo cost? And it's sort of, basically it's more expensive. Yes, and it's more expensive because there's more manufacturing processing involved in it, and it's refined to a different quality. And that's because the overall process is a different mixture of cost. And just taking that simple measure is too simple. And then the need for speed, rotogravure speed. Everybody looks at the fastest. They want the best and the fastest and everything. And that's when we get into this top trumps game. But that needs to be questioned too. So why from a printhead manufacturer's perspective? Obviously, Ricoh produces printers, it produces print engines, print modules, and print heads, as well as ink in some cases as well. But the printhead in particular is a critical part of any inkjet system. And people are often choosing a printhead on the basis of a perception of how it will play out. Of course, OEMs need to sell to customers, so they have to have technology arguments and stories to tell. So the printhead is actually about, it's over a quarter in most cases of the capital cost of the equipment. And there's some real examples there of real equipment with real figures behind it. Obviously non-specific to not reveal the details, but the printhead is a significant component in any inkjet system. So if the printhead selection is bad, or if the printhead itself isn't optimum for the application, then it's quite a big mistake potentially. And with that cost element and capital cost of equipment being a key thing, we can reduce the cost of printheads, which is reducing the price of nozzles, reduce the number of nozzles, which is counterintuitive, is reducing the number of the resolution. But maybe that's actually reducing the capital cost to a point where it actually makes sense. But conversely, if you increase the number of nozzles, then you're increasing the cost unless you reduce the price per nozzle. So there's a balance in there. Productivity, if every nozzle fires more fluid and can fire more fluid reliably, then that means you get more out of each nozzle, so it's more productive, so the cost is spread. If the printhead lasts for a longer time, that's going to change the economics too, in obvious ways. And if you can have it so that there's no intervention needed, so it's a predictable life as well, that's another sort of less easily measured benefit. Whenever you introduce complexity in the printhead, you introduce complexity in the build and also in the drive and control. When you introduce complexity in those things, you increase the cost. So that's against the idea of bringing down and making inkjet technology more accessible from a capital cost perspective. And then lastly, if we made printheads so that were more tolerant and gave a bigger window of operation for ink, then maybe the ink price could come down. But whilst you actually specify that inks have to be within a very narrow window, you're either compromising the end application or increasing the cost of producing the ink or formulating the ink, or both. So it is quite a critical balance of many different factors. Often with digital, the inkjet developments are often, and I see a lot, as those of us in the printhead world do, we see a lot. I'll say a lot. They're often bad, not a majority, and then they change over time. Sometimes you see mistakes made early, and then it does take a little while to adjust and amend. But if you have a poorly conceived idea of what problem it is you're trying to solve, or no idea of the problem you're trying to solve, if you're just trying to copy the form but without looking at how it fits in, then that can be a bad starting point. And then if you end up sort of promising one thing and then delivering something else, then that's not a reliable thing. It's not a good thing. It doesn't create a good impression, and it makes people think of Inkjet as unready. And on top of that, we all tell a muddled story. We all tell each other that we're wrong. And when somebody says that one supplier told me this and one supplier told me that, and they're all different stories, then who do you believe? It's just very difficult from a consumer of Inkjet or a potential investor in Inkjet to decide whether we're ready or not. So there's no place for fundamentalism. We need to start with why. I'll come on to that at the end of first principle thinking. And I think the individual components, and I say printheads, inks, other system components, we need to actually join ourselves together and accept responsibility together. Google Maps and Goldratt. It's a very simple point here. In Google Maps, when you're looking at your journey time, Google Maps doesn't ask you what car you're driving. It just tells you the journey time, because it doesn't matter what car you're driving. The speed will be constrained by other elements, and that's pretty well the same in industrial processes too. You could theoretically go really fast. Do you A, need to go fast, and B, is everything allowing you to go fast, to that theoretical fast? So in onto the Goldratt thing, if you have a series of operations you do in most manufacturing processes, and printing is one step, deposition of fluid is one step along that line, you only really need to balance it. And the tradition is that printing is a specialism that's done by a third party. Therefore, they need to do it as fast as possible so they can deliver as much printed material as possible to somebody else who keeps it in stock and then trickles it into their process. Now, in the ideal supply chain, it should be done in line or close to line, on demand, with pull rather than push. And therefore, you have to look at the speed of the previous and post processing. And then, of course, market demand could be a bottleneck. So there's no point, anytime you don't balance it, you're actually introducing waste in the system. So if we're busting a gut to be technically clever, to go faster, just because that's what's been done before by the converting industry, but the brand owner only needs to have a certain flow of product, then we're really missing the mark. In many cases, printing speed is not the bottleneck. So there is a clamor for new technology. People always want something new and different, and it's that's part of the story in trying to sell a tech business or tech device, is how current is it? And I think you could look at all different products and they have things in them, technology in them, which are tried and tested, and people don't question. They don't need to have new from that. I think the printhead is something, because it's a big part of the overall package. People like to sell the new story about something new in it, and people like to have something specified that's fresh. If you look at what all inkjet devices do, we take a 15-year-old printhead, it delivers 33 million drops a second. And then we take some of our own there, the Gen 5, Gen 6, you can see basically the same device with some tweaks and improvements, and it depends how you look at it with fluids and whether you're grayscale or not. But we go up from 33 million to 57 million to 150 million to 200 plus million. And really, does it give any benefit? Well, actually, for fluid delivery, it's a pump. If you go to half the drop size and you double the firing frequency, the firing speeds, then you're delivering the same amount, but you're delivering it with higher resolution. So we go back to the resolution question. It's really what the end consumer needs. And do they need the things that the high resolution can deliver? And can you do it reliably? So tighter control of drop mass and velocity, jetting velocity, deviation, so you can actually place drops where they need to be, because as you go to higher resolution, you notice those differences. And can you throw ink over a large gap? So all of these things are directions of travel, but do they need a step increase, or are the old devices perfectly good in many cases? I think there are a lot of people who are actually sort of introducing the latest tech when really it's not appropriate, in my opinion. So we play this game here, and the trump cards. I made these. It's not a real trump card pack, so don't go looking in the shops. It would be quite a narrow niche for trump cards to be produced with these things on them. But we do look at it, and if you look there, if you're clearly picking out a dimensional resolution, then the Samba's best. If you look at drop size and smaller is better, than the Samba's best. If you look at the pumping power, oh well, there's the one on the right there that's a bit better. And actually, some of the basic devices aren't that far off anyway. So a metal head Gen 5, Gen 6 isn't that far off a Samba by virtue of the fact it's a small drop. Now, if you want high resolution small drops, then that one's better. If you want something that can pump with appropriate drop size, and there's no reliability thing on here. So the point is, all of these things are good. All of these products are good. And they all do a job, and it's choosing the right one to do the right job, regardless of whether it's new or different. It's just whether it's actually the appropriate thing to deliver the right amount of something in the right way. Now, printhead producers spend millions on R&D, and it's just that's the game. Every year, more. And each development takes many years. Silicon MEMS has taken an awful lot of money to come to the point we are now, where it's not widely implemented. Now, if you spend another 100 million, you're not likely to get very much more technology. If you spend another billion, then maybe you'll get a little bit, but there's a diminishing return on the dollars that are invested in this from all printhead manufacturers. And these specifications don't tell the whole story. So we really should take stock of what's there, and then start to think of the big picture. We have to have a justification for spending money on R&D, just as everybody does. If it doesn't do something new, if it doesn't do something different, then we should be very careful about spending money on it. With new technology like silicon MEMS, and I've talked about this elsewhere, but it's eye-watering amounts of money just to keep the doors open. And if you don't have the volume, you just lose money. You're pouring money out of the door. If you do have the volume, then great, but you have to look at the available market. But if it does something different, great. But if it doesn't, then it's high risk. From a printhead manufacturer's perspective, you have to formulate a printhead, which is a bundle of all sorts of different technologies to do a useful job. And if it does something useful, you achieve volume, and then you can maybe smile. If it doesn't, then it's potentially disastrous. So the questions we ask ourselves is there a need for competition between the printhead vendors, or as to the same extent there has been? Most OEMs would say yes, and most consumers say yes. They like an arms race. They like technology to move ahead. But when it moves ahead with a sort of an uncertainty. So we need to see whether it delivers, and whether real customers actually care whether it's a new thing or whether it just does what they want it to do. And in the industry, I think reliability is better. So I liken it down there on the images. The staid old, if you're going to take your children out in the car, you go slowly, carefully in a Volvo estate. The same thing can be raced up to do all sorts of spectacular racing. And then if you really want a single seater to go maximum speed and compete with the fastest, then you can go to a Formula One. But most people choose towards the top end of that range for their everyday life. And industry is everyday life, where reliability is perhaps the underestimated factor. Silicon MEMS is supposed to be faster and cheaper. I've talked about the sort of fixed costs of carrying on an operation. It doesn't necessarily deliver lower cost per nozzle, because you have to take into account the whole picture. Higher resolution is fine, but if it's got dancing tick marks, then you need some strategies to actually cope with those. it's not necessarily straightforward, and that's why you have to question it. And it would be straightforward if it wasn't necessarily at such high resolutions with such small drops. Do you have to constrain the ink to fit inside the printhead, to work through the printhead? In some cases, yes. In some cases, it actually adds advantage. In some cases, it adds severe disadvantages. And going at higher frequencies, balancing it on that knife edge, then that's introducing other things. And in a lot of cases, you're reserving the resolution capability for error correction, which seems like you've got, it might be like Manchester City, where you've actually got an awful lot of expensive assets on the subs bench. Is it easier and cheaper to build a printer? Well, I think the experience of what we've seen so far is that it's not. And there has to be some eye to the costs of building machines, especially when people have had this little hiatus in their lives where now they've got to get back on their feet. Do they actually want to invest lots of money before they get a return on learning a whole new game? And silicon MEMS is a whole new game. I won't dwell too much on this. This is a roadmap. Inside that red box, you've got flow through, non-flow through, all metalhead, all the same fit and format, with different drop size options, 5 picoliter, 7 picoliter, 12 picoliter, all operating in similar ways. And you could take the same platform and you could operate with all of those things, which gives you an application scope without extra engineering. I think that's valuable. Then we have the single full color print head, thin film print head on the left there, just down here. That's got some applicability for simpler build on wide format scanning machines. And then we're coming through with this, and I'll talk a little about this. It's a thin film device, but it's not actually going for the high resolution small drop, and that's where it differs. But it is thin film silicon MEMS. What we're trying to do with all this new technology is reduce jet angle deviation, increase stability, increase the stability over frequency at high frequency. It's all about putting the drops reliably in place wherever they are with the fluid that's needed. So we're introducing sensible things like improved image uniformity, easier to build bars and stitch, internal bonding to the best it can be, so that fluid, the window is as wide as it can be with the standards. Detachable cables make sense. It helps us from an inventory perspective. It helps OEMs from an availability perspective as well. Simple piping. On some of the Ricoh print heads, it allows for options of 2, 4 color. And for those who don't need that, then that's actually an extra complication. So options for simpler piping are being introduced, and then write protection, just to ensure that the right print head is in the right system, so that the OEM can control how it works. There's the new print. I'm not going to dwell on it. So it's a multi-row matrix array for various reasons. It's Z-bar, so it's easy to stitch together. This is the first in a family. We have a vision of going from single module to double module to double resolution if need be, the OEM can put these together, or we can put them together in the factory. So all of these things are in our thoughts. The advantages of the format of the print head is that at longer throw distance, you can actually get better imaging. And I think that'll be explained in more detail with the product details that come along. So looking at the ink, we're paying a lot of focus. I said it should be thought of earlier in the process, and I think that's true. There are some initiatives to build printers that actually don't have an ink available that meets the needs of the application. So that can often be a rate determining step on delivering something to market. We're trying to take a proactive view on delivering inks that do the job, so that it de-risks developments. So in our UK-based technology centre, we're working with the major ink companies to attack certain challenges in application, so that we can do the work first to make it more reliable, and to have known options to develop printers for applications. And we believe that taking the responsibility is actually adding warranty in there between the ink company and the printhead manufacturer. Rather than pointing fingers towards each other, we should actually go together to end customers, brand owners maybe in some cases, and we should have joined up thinking, joined up responsibility, and we should not be squabbling and finger pointing on the outside. which might be a fresh approach. So just summing up, first principle thinking, always a good idea. Determine what to solve. Apply digital where it has an advantage, but don't be constrained by trying to match the form of something that's existed before. Use analog where necessary. I think there are some great ideas and great introductions of hybrid systems where they use a bit of analog and a bit of digital. That works well. And then get the story straight. Don't try to sell a muddled story. If you've thought about it from first principles, then the story automatically gets straight. It's often muddled when you don't. Proving economic benefit is appealing to those the right side of people's brain, or the left side actually. And it enables, what we're actually doing is we're enabling consumers to have variety, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. So that's really effectively all I have to say.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. I think you covered a lot of ground there, a lot of issues in a very succinct manner. So thank you for that. Some of the things that I pick up, first off, just need to settle in my own mind. Do you drive a Volvo yourself?
I have a Volvo, but I don't drive it so often.
Oh, you do actually have a Volvo, so you speak from experience.
It's probably the most reliable car. I actually drive a Formula One car. No, I don't.
Yeah, right. A bit thirsty, I hear. A bit thirsty.
And it's difficult to tow the children in a trailer.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I like that kind of analogy there. There's quite a number of things that I can pick up on that I thought were really good. Obviously, the groupthink and yeah, that's, I guess you said it's an Orwellian term. It's really where you get this thing called confirmation bias. Is that right? Where you kind of like you're talking the same language to one another, but you're not actually. It's introverted language, right?
It is. That's exactly the point, Marcus. Yeah, it's very introvert, and it's the Inkjet community. When we talk about the Inkjet community and the Inkjet, we're basically a tribe, and we look at ourselves, and we're young, and that's the way it starts. But looking more outwardly, when we mature, we look more outwardly and try to engage with other people who don't see us the way that we see ourselves. So groupthink is something that is introvert.
You also mentioned that, and I like this. Look, if you want offset quality, print offset.
Yeah,
that's as
simple as that.
Delightfully simple point. Well made. Why? Yeah, that's obviously then, I suppose, what you're saying there is a misconception of the value of digital, right? I think people think of it as a replacement rather than it's got its own thing, right?
Yeah, I think I was in a presentation years ago, and I forget the name, but it struck me as it was a black screen, and somebody put up one sentence, and I wish I knew the sentence verbatim, but what it effectively said is, don't use Inkjet to copy all the difficulties and disadvantages of analog. That's effectively what it is. It's got a different set of benefits and a different set of disadvantages. And if you try to put that shaped peg into the wrong shaped hole, then you're actually making a mockery of the whole thing. So it was very pithy, much more pithy than I've put it, but I've always remembered it, that use the benefits of Inkjet and to overcome the disadvantages of analog, but don't use Inkjet to try and copy the advantages of, for example, offset.
Exactly, it's missing the point. And the other point I think you made I liked was that industry is everyday life. We need to create solutions for everyday life, not solutions for things that are very clever, but actually people don't encounter on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's like a Formula One race is an hour and a half on a weekend for half the year, and they have all they try and surrounding that. There's a whole industry. That's an industry, fair enough. But most industry is day in, day out. It's 24/7 or any variation on that. It's mundane, and it's actually a process to generate something that hopefully people will buy and to profit by doing so that people can earn their living, and it's very ordinary. It's more like Volvo Estate.
Yeah, absolutely. So therefore, the TH6310 that you mentioned, the new head, is a sporty Volvo. So it has the practical elements of a Volvo, but actually it's a supercharged version. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit souped up. It does the same basic job, but a little bit little bit faster, but it's not going. It's not chasing that kind of knife edge. It's not trying to balance itself. It's actually okay. You can tune it to between, I don't know, 4 point something, 4.2 to 5.8 or 6 picoliters, but that makes no difference. That's tuning it so that you can actually optimize. It doesn't really change the end result. It's the same drop size as the metal heads that we have in a range, and it's a little bit of extra headspace on firing frequency if it should be needed. Maybe it's a little bit easier to stitch the print heads together. It's not a spectacular thing, and you could call it a question. Well, do we actually need it? Well, yes, because some people actually might like that sort of thing. Some people do like sporty Volvos, but it's extra, but it's not going out on a limb to with risk involved.
And that's a good point. Leads us into the final point. I think the mainstream, if you like to call it, don't particularly like risk. So what they need to see is clear economic benefit.
Yeah, that's it. When any mature industry is mature. Any industry that's looking to adopt Inkjet isn't sort of starting out to do it. It's actually looking to replace something that's done before. So it's already been used to making money from what it did before. And therefore, if it's a mature operation, it's going to be run by people who are very logical and rational. They're not going to be the right brain, creative early adopters. They're going to be the people who need to be convinced. And they need to be convinced by evidence and thorough study. And that means economics as well. So I think getting the argument straight there economically is important.
Yeah, and particularly at the very beginning, as you said, first principles, problem first, tech second, not tech first, problem maybe. Actually, it's far more productive if we focus on the problem and present the clear economic benefits. So thanks so much for joining us, Richard. Really good session. Enjoyed it. I think there's some fantastic takeaways there, and actionable items. So thanks very much. Look forward to having you back in the future.
Thanks, Marcus.